And good evening, sports fans, and welcome to a brand new episode of Let's Whine About DMV Sports here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Tonight, we must say goodbye to the NFL season. That's right, folks. Unfortunately, since we have last talked, both the Baltimore Ravens and the Washington Commanders have seen their playoff runs come to an end. For the Ravens, it was great success that ended in pretty strong disappointment. And for the Commanders, it was surprise success that were honestly not too broken up. That, things came to an end. It was a surprise season. They weren't supposed to be that good, but they were that good, and they made it to the NFC Championship game. So we'll get to tip a glass to them tonight as we talk about their season as a whole, some of postseason awards for their players, and what to look forward to in the offseason. They've got a great situation with the salary cap. They've got some pretty decent draft picks, and they've got some holes to fill. This is not a perfect roster, and there are some moves that still need to be made. For the Ravens, we will also be giving some postseason awards. And we will also be looking at the offseason to come. Yes, probably not as good a cap situation as we would hope for, but that's every year for the Ravens. And some pretty decent draft picks, particularly in the later part of the draft on day 3. We're going to talk about how that's come to be and what Baltimore should do with those picks. We will touch a little bit perhaps on not the Commanders. We will talk a lot about the Commanders. We will touch a little bit on the Caps and the Wizards, but the Caps continue to win and the Wizards continue to be the Lizards. They keep earning that nickname, the Lizards. And we'll be doing all of this while finishing up our Value Wine Month with the rosé version of our Value Wine brand. We've got all of that and more coming up on Let's Whine About DMV Sports on the IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
IE Sports Radio fans, this show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
Rise and shine. It's 4 a.m. The stars are still out. The sun is beneath the horizon, but it's time to punch in and go to work. The comfort of your warm-ups turns into the grinding out of your reps as the clinking and the clanking of the plates create a symphony of euphoria. There's no other feeling like it. Earn it, burn it, and take what's yours. IE Sports Radio has proudly partnered with Vital Apparel, a brand that not only fits great, but also promotes and donates to mental health research. Use our code IESR to get 15% off their comfortable and inspiring gym wear and help them on their amazing journey to support mental health. Go hard, take part in your iron therapy, and be strong. Because when your mental health is as strong as you are, there's no telling how far you'll go.
Hey there, IE Sports Radio fans. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Seal the Deal Wax Seals by Cecilia B. You just finished your very own wedding or baby shower invitations and you're looking for that extra special touch? Maybe you just wrote a letter to a relative or a friend and you want to add to their smile when they receive it. Then seal the deal with Cecilia's handmade sealing wax stamps for your invitations, letters, and gifts. You bring the deal, we'll bring the seal. You can find them on Instagram at sealthedeal_wax stamps and on Facebook, Seal the Deal Wax Seals.
For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the IE Sports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop, including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at IE Sports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back to Let's Whine About DMV Sports here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Once again, shout out to all of our awesome sponsors, as well as a new sponsor as well, our newest sponsor, Raw Nutrition Supplements. Go to getrawnutrition.com and use promo code IESR for 10% off. So once again, thank you to all of our sponsors, including our newest one, Raw Nutrition Supplements. And of course, you heard all of the great places to follow IE Sports Radio on all of social media. Do be sure to also follow yours truly on X and Instagram at letswine_IESR. And do be sure as well, in addition to checking out the website for the show pages and all of that jazz, to check it out for the blog, iesportsradio.com/blog, or at iesportsradioblog.wordpress.com, and also check out the blog X page, which will be sharing articles weekly. And now that we've taken care of all of the fun little admin stuff, let's get to our wine, and we got to get to it quick because we have some slightly heartbreaking but dense sports material to get through. So we are in the final week of January, which means we are wrapping up the theme of the month, which is our value brand month for California Roots, saving you a couple dollars on your alcohol budget for the month of January coming off of the holidays. And of course, we are finishing off, as I said last week, with the rosé. We've had a red, we've had a white, we've had a sweet, and we are finishing it off with a rosé. Now, I like doing rosés as taste tests for different brands because they're a lot simpler and a lot easier to drink than many other types of wine. So it makes it a nice, safe pick, a nice, easy pick. It is not difficult to necessarily make a rosé. You just need a good, solid red grape as your base. So if a wine brand isn't making a good rosé, you probably should not be drinking it. But if they can make a good rosé, that can give you hope for other wines as well. So like I said, California Roots, made out of California. This is their rosé. It is 12.5% alcohol by volume, you can see there, which is a little bit higher for a rosé. Most are in the 11 to 12 range, so you're talking about the upper echelon a little bit. I guess some of them do get to 13%, 13.5. So let me redact that previous statement. It's kind of right smack dab in your typical rosé range. And California Roots has wonderful write-ups on the backs of their bottles. So let's read this week's, shall we? I'm going to skip the first part because it's all the same. Crafted from premium grapes grown under the warm California sun, our rosés' fresh berry and citrus flavors impart the taste of summer any time of the year. Pairs perfectly with spicy grilled shrimp and crisp spinach salad. Enjoy pure vineyard-to-table goodness in every sip. That's oddly specific to go with the spicy grilled shrimp and the crispy spinach salad, but nonetheless, it sounds really tasty. So let's give it our pour. And of course, our standard IE Sports Radio wine glass. Looking at the color, it's very pale, even for a rosé. Sitting in the glass, it's almost clear, which kind of gives off more French style than California style. Most California rosés tend to be a little bit pinker, but this one is very faint in color. Let's give it a little swirly swirl over here. Got to get that swirl action going. There we go. Let's give it a sniff. Very soft red fruit flavors. Definitely got that berry coming through. I'm not really getting much citrus in terms based on the description, but it's all in the taste. So let's have a sip. Wow. I don't want to say strong, but prominent upfront flavor. You don't get the citrus on the nose, but it does come through a lot more dominantly once it sits on the palate. Not overly dry, but a little bit of dryness to it. I can feel it on the sides of the tongues. And a little bit of acidity. There's a lot going on here. And I think it might need a little bit of time to breathe because I'm getting a little bit of bitterness. So let's give it a second here. It's got promise. The fruit flavors, very nice, very citrusy. But yeah, something with that acidity is coming through a little bit too potently, throwing the balance off a little bit. So let's give that a few minutes and see how it comes to. California Roots has been pretty good so far. The Sauvignon Blanc was very good, and it continued to hold up throughout the week as I kind of sipped it slowly. The Sangria, simple and good. The red blend, mixed reviews on that one, so we'll see how the rosé ultimately turns out here. We're going to take a quick break, but before we do, just some quick hits on the Caps and the Wizards, who I'm going to call the Lizards again this week. The Caps 3-1 on the week to maintain their spot as the best team in the Eastern Conference, 33-11-5. Player of the Week award is tied between Alexis Protas and Pierre-Luc Dubois. Both had 5 points, 2 goals, and 3 assists. And for the Ovechkin record watch, he did get a goal on the board this week. He's up to 875. He is 19 to tie and 20 to break the record. And the Lizards, busy week for them because they were playing late on last Saturday, so we didn't capture last Saturday's game. And then they played 4 more games this week, losing all 5 of them to drop to 6-38. 13-game losing streak, only one win away from home, by the way, 1-20 on the road, which is great because they still have more of this West Coast road trip ahead of them. Player of the Week award, again, continues to be no one because nobody gets the award when you're on a 13-game losing streak. Kyle Kuzma had some interesting comments after the game regarding the direction of the team. I would rather we just went ahead and traded him sooner rather than later. So that's my feeling on that one. But we are going to take a quick break before we jump into our dense football talk. Do not go away. You're listening to Let's Whine About DMV Sports here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey, Cleveland and Columbus sports fans, this is Jen D, host of the Show of the Land on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. If you love Cleveland and Columbus sports like I do, be sure to tune in live to the Show of the Land on Tuesdays, where we will cover the Cleveland Browns, Cavs, Guardians, and Monsters. We will also talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets, Crew, Fury, and of course, the Ohio State Buckeyes. We'll also cover other colleges in the area like Akron, Kent State, Cleveland State, Mount Union, John Carroll, Baldwin Wallace, Youngstown State, among others. So like I said, if you love Cleveland and Columbus sports like I do, be sure to tune in Tuesdays to the Show of the Land with Jen B on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, Pittsburgh? This is Ralph Calise, the host of the Injury Report on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Are you that passionate, diehard Steelers, Penguins, Pirates, or just a Pittsburgh sports fan? Then please join me on the Injury Report every Tuesday on IE Sports Radio, the direct feed for all that is sports. And I will update you on all that's black and gold, have you telling your Pittsburgh fans and friends what's up with Pittsburgh sports. Tune in Tuesday with me, Ralph Calise, the Injury Report on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Let's go!
And welcome back to Let's Whine About DMV Sports here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Now we get into some somewhat depressing talk, but first I have to give shout out Taryn Rodriguez in the chat room wishing me to try to have an awesome show, and I saved this comment for this moment. It was a tough loss for the Commanders, Taryn says, but they had an awesome season and their future is super bright. I saved that comment, Taryn, just for this moment as we get into discussing the Commanders, who had a surprise upset victory over the Detroit Lions in the divisional round, 45-31. Defense gave up a ton of yards, but they forced 5 turnovers, including a pick 6 by safety Quan Martin, and it was enough to get them to the NFC Championship game, which was this afternoon, where unfortunately they would fall to the Eagles. They were in it for a good portion of the game, but the story of the day just had a few too many turnovers, which ruined their momentum, their chances to get an early jump on the Eagles. They had a fumble on their second drive of the game, which led to an Eagles touchdown. They got out to an early lead there. Then they were driving again later, and Or actually, no, the Eagles had just scored before the half. And then they were driving, or they went to drive, but then they fumbled the kickoff, which allowed the Eagles to get another score, which gave them incredible momentum entering halftime. Then they had just forced a punt and were driving before a third fumble truly derailed the offense. Jaden Daniels had a remarkable day. He did throw an interception late, but the game was already well beyond reach at that point, just trying to do whatever he could to keep the team in it. And then, of course, the defense could do nothing. The Eagles would put up 55.7 touchdowns, 2 field goals. Just absurd. Actually, was it 8 touchdowns? It might have been 8 touchdowns, no field goals. I don't remember. But either way, just an absurd offensive performance. Saquon Barkley took their first play 60 yards for a touchdown and never looked back. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts had 3 rushing touchdowns. Even backup running back Will Shipley got in on it at the end there. That's why I think there was 8 touchdowns, because those 3 had 7 of them. And I know Jalen Hurts had a passing touchdown to A.J. Brown. So must have been 8 touchdowns. And I think they might have gone for a 2-point conversion at one point, maybe to give themselves a 2-score lead or something. I don't remember what it was. But in any case, the season does come to an end. So we must do a proper off-season send-off. Obviously, this is not a case where we will send them to the off-season and then not talk about them until August. We will definitely be talking about football kind of over the course of the off-season. But we do have to do a proper send-off nonetheless. So let's start with some post-season awards. Season MVP, this is a no-brainer. Rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels, Offensive Rookie of the Year. If he hasn't been given the award, he better be winning it in the near future. He came in and was absolutely outstanding. Took a couple of games to really get going, but one of the best rookie seasons I have seen in some time. And then for him to will this team through the playoffs and to the NFC Championship game. And let's be honest, going back to Taryn's comment, awesome season and future is bright. The awesome season has taken into the context of this team was not supposed to be this team this year. We were expecting 6 to 7 wins. I would have considered 8 and 9 a successful season with a rookie quarterback, new head coach, front office only in its second year, multiple new pieces, relying heavily on draft picks. And here they are going 12-5 and making the playoffs and making the NFC Championship game at that. And I think a lot of that had to do with Jaden Daniels' performance. So Jaden Daniels is the season MVP. No, there's nobody who really comes in second place. You might be able to make an argument for Terry McLaurin is probably the only other one who you would even put in this conversation. Biggest surprise goes to another rookie, cornerback Mike Sanderstill, a player who we didn't hear a ton about leading up into the draft, and a lot of people thought he would be limited to the nickel role for his career, but he came in, he did start as the nickel. His early season struggles, I think, were a part of the defense as a whole struggling, relying on Benjamin St-Juste and Emmanuel Forbes as the boundary corners, both of whom struggled before Forbes was eventually traded. Benjamin St-Juste did settle in a little bit as the season went on, but he was matching up against number 1 receivers, and he's not a number 1 corner. Let's just be honest about it. But Sanders still started in the slot, eventually got moved to the outside because free agent corner Noah Igbehine, who is also could have been a surprise candidate, showed very promising play in the slot. So they moved Sanders still to the outside, where he played really well, if not better, in the slot. And his play just continued to improve throughout the season, culminating in that divisional round game against the Lions, where he had 2 interceptions. So overall, a very good rookie season for him. A bit surprising that he came in right away. Cornerback is one of the hardest positions in the NFL, and especially for a rookie. So the fact that he was able to come in and be so impactful as a rookie and to take over for players who were absolutely failing at the position, because they also used reserve veteran Mike Davis at times, and he looked lost as well. So to be able to step into a role that you weren't even supposed to play and do that, definitely surprised and need to give him a shout out. Biggest disappointment. This is a combo award. It is the interior defensive linemen, defensive tackles, Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, are two highest paid players on the roster, I believe, by salary cap hit for this year and next year. I think it might Terry McLaurin might be, but two of the top three at minimum, and they were inconsistent, injured on and off. Jonathan Allen was injured for much of the year, but just the overall performance of the interior defensive line left something to be desired. Basically forced rookie Johnny Newton to step up into that role, and he did. He had moments, but some moments he didn't. And then by the end, by today, we're relying on journeyman veterans Jalen Holmes and Sheldon Day to hold down the interior. So not a good season for the defensive tackles. Most of the defensive line played up and down. Dante Fowler got off to a great start, but fizzled down the stretch. But yes, I would have to say the interior defensive line was the biggest disappointment on the team. And the unsung hero, free agent center Tyler Biadasz, came over from Dallas on a 3-year deal. The center spot had been wildly inconsistent for a few years. Previously, Chase Roulier had locked down the spot, and for a couple seasons, he was really solid, but then he started to deal with injuries. His play declined, and then they have failed to replace him leading up to that. Even a second-year, third-round pick from last year, Ricky Stromberg, who was supposed to be the heir apparent at the center spot, was injured as a rookie and then cut before the season. So a lot of uncertainty, but they went out and they found Biadasz, and he stabilized the interior of that offensive line, which the interior of the offensive line was one of the weakest parts of the team as a whole last year, and it was an area of concern. But Biadasz locked down the center spot, provided strong play, despite some inconsistencies with left guard Nick Allegretti next to him, and right guard Samuel Cosme dealing with some injuries on and off before ultimately being knocked out in the playoffs, which did not help the cause today. So Tyler Biadasz gets my Unsung Hero Award. And then a player to watch for next year, and this is interesting because normally this award would go to a young player, but in this case, it's a little bit different. It's cornerback Marshawn Latimer, who the team traded for at the trade deadline. He was injured much of the time he was here dealing with a hamstring injury. He gets a whole offseason to hopefully let that heal. He did play in the playoffs. Play was a little bit up and down, but this is the guy. You've got Sandra still, who you know you have a piece there. If they bring back Inga Bahine, and then Lattimore can get healed up and be that number one corner, then now you have the makings of a really solid cornerback room. Maybe you find another veteran, or maybe you go out and you draft a guy in the middle rounds to solidify that group. But Lattimore's health and then ability to return to his play as a number one cornerback, that is what is going to establish the cornerback room next year. So now let's talk about the offseason preview. What does the team have to look ahead to for the next 6 or so months? And it starts off great. They are in phenomenal salary cap situation. Absolutely phenomenal. Third best in the league, second or third best in the league. And they're in a great opportunity to spend it. And that's another reason why I'm not particularly upset about the results of the playoffs, because, this is probably the worst roster this team is going to have for the next couple of seasons, because they have tons of salary cap, puts them in the position to add some really solid players. And they have some decent draft picks. I think they have 3 top 80 draft picks. Then there's a little bit of gap in the middle of the rounds, and then they have some good late round draft capital to build up the bottom part of the roster. But they've got salary cap space and draft capital to make some big impactful additions to this roster. And it is by far not a perfect roster. It's a good roster, and they solidified a few spots in this past year by, like I said, getting Jaden Daniels. There's your franchise quarterback. They added some good pieces on the offensive line. They added some good pieces to the defense, but there is still more to be done. This is the to-do list. This is the areas they need to work on. Continuing to build the offensive line. Yes, it was much improved from when it's been the past couple of years. That doesn't mean that there still isn't room to improve. I don't know if Nick Allegretti is the long-term answer at guard. I think Samuel Cosme is at right guard, but he got hurt in the playoffs, might not be ready to start the season next year. So they have to account for that. Andrew Wiley was okay, not great at right tackle. I think you either move on from him or you shift him inside to left guard and let Allegretti either A, switch to right guard, or maybe you put Wiley at right guard to start the year since Cosme might not be ready to go. Or you move him to left guard and let Allegretti, who can play all three interior spots, be that primary backup. Yes, they did sign him for $5 million a year, but as a sixth offensive lineman, when you've got at least one rookie or one player on a rookie's deal and probably another one or two, you can afford to use a veteran guy as that sixth offensive lineman. I think Nick Allegretti could play that role quite well. And then that leaves a spot open at tackle. Which Brandon Coleman, the rookie, played admirably at left tackle, but he also showed some flaws. He's got promise. I don't know if he sticks at left tackle long term. He might be a guy who you shift to right tackle. A little bit more of that bruiser style, which then you find a new left tackle, which you could do in free agency with your massive salary cap space, or you try to find a good one in the last part of the first round. The Commanders will be picking 29th. That might not necessarily be the most ideal time to find a franchise left tackle. Not saying it can't be done, but it might not be the greatest time to be looking for one. Also, more weapons. I think, based on the play the last couple of games of the season, I think we need to revamp the running back room. I think Brian Robinson Jr., he started off the year admirably, but he faded down the stretch, dealt with some injuries, did not show out very well in the playoffs and late in the season. And then Austin Eckler started to show his age. He was also banged up. Jeremy McNichols was the third back. He showed flashes, but he's not the guy. Chris Rodriguez, could he be one of the guys? Maybe. But I think you've got four pieces there. I think you got to completely rearrange them. Maybe only bring one back. I think that's an area that they could address both in free agency and the draft. And it's a very talented draft for running backs. In fact, heck, if the right running back is there at 29, I say you shoot your shot and go ahead and get him. But so that and adding more weapons at receiver, bringing back tight end Zach Ertz. I think if you wanted to pick a couple of spots where you just bring a couple guys back and run it back, tight end could be one of those with Zach Ertz. I also think defensive end, you re-sign Dante Fowler and maybe make an addition and kind of run it back. Positions that you don't necessarily dedicate a ton of resources to. You just let them marinate because you can't solve every problem in one offseason usually. But adding more pieces at wide receiver and revamping the running back room along with re-signing Zach Ertz could be the play there for more weapons. And then more defensive playmakers. I think you could do exactly what I just said with the running backs, with the defensive tackles, scrap them, trade or release Jonathan Allen, trade Daron Payne. Releasing him does not financially work out for you. Or if you keep him, but move on from Allen and get a new piece in the interior to go along with Payne and Jonathan and Jershawn Newton, I think that could work. And then continuing, like I said, to kind of mold that back seven. They've got Frankie Louvu, who is probably the best defensive player on the team this year. He'll be back. If they can get Jeremy Chin back, I think they can keep working that secondary, keep working the pieces there, adding a few spots here and there. If they can't bring back Bobby Wagner, finding another complimentary linebacker because they run a 4-3 defensive scheme, but really it's a 4-2-5 because they bring Jeremy Chin up into the box, and he is your box safety. If you can use Quan Martin as kind of this hybrid rover safety, find a single high safety, which could also be the target on the first or second round, finding somebody who can play deep safety. That is a formula that could work for this team. So, a couple of just things to just for the team to marinate on, to think about. But I do think, and this is not an easy list to accomplish right here. Continuing to build the offensive line, that's tricky. More weapons, how do you approach it? Defensive playmakers, how do you rework some of the parts of this defense? So it's not easy, but like I said, they've got a ton of salary cap space, and they've got good draft picks to do it, to where they could add a couple of impact offensive linemen, 3 or 4 weapons, 3 or 4 defensive playmakers, let's say 10 significant pieces. I think they have the resources to do it. And if they can do it, then the goal is going to be the NFC Championship game again next year. That'll do it for the first football send-off of the show. We're going to take a quick break, our final break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap it up with the Ravens send-off. So do not go away. You're listening to Let's Whine About DMV Sports here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, everybody? This is Taryn Rodriguez. Are you a fan of volleyball? Are you a fan of Thunder Spikes? Then I have the show for you, Set Point, where I cover NCAA men's and women's volleyball, high school boys and girls volleyball, beach volleyball, and even professional volleyball. Catch the action every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back to Let's Whine About DMV Sports here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We just did one football send-off. Now we are going to do a second one with the Baltimore Ravens, who did lose in the divisional round this past Sunday to the Buffalo Bills. It was a tight one. There were some stupid plays, and once again, the story of the day and the story seemingly of the season for every Ravens loss, for most of them, was the team beat themselves. Looking at parts of the game, I gotta say, I think the Ravens were the better team of the two on the field in Buffalo, but the Bills played a solid game. They played a clean game. They didn't commit stupid penalties. They didn't commit turnovers. They played good, solid football. And the Ravens, while they had some wow plays, and Lamar made wow plays right up until the end of it, they beat themselves with 3 turnovers, all of which were silly. None of them were like, oh, that's a great play by Buffalo. How did he make that read? No, that was like, oh, I'm just going to drop the ball on the ground here and let them pick it up and run it back. And, oh, I'm a tight end who's going to try to dance around in the middle of the field and try to avoid 4 defenders who are around me. Yeah, that's going to work. And then I'm a Pro Bowl tight end that's going to drop the game-tying 2-point conversion, which, okay, I will say in Mark Andrews' defense, that was not the easiest, most catchable ball, but it's in a moment, in a time, in a space where you look to a guy like Mark Andrews to make that play. And I think he knows too, and he said it in social media, he knows, and the team did a very good job of supporting him, of not beating it up about it. He knows that that's a play he has to make. But in any case, the Ravens season comes to an end, 12-5, which was probably a little bit above expectations. I think 10 to 11 wins was the expectation for this team. I think they slightly outperformed that. They won the division, which was great with the late season comeback over the Steelers. And then pretty decent performance against the Steelers in the first round, and could have beaten Buffalo, but then it did not work out at the end. And people forget, this is a season we came into that there were some question marks. A lot of guys left in free agency. The team was relying on a lot of young pieces, and some players stepped up, some players did not. Lamar had an incredible year, which helped a lot. But I think we have to remember that this was not the season that we all looked at as the season that this team was going to make a Super Bowl run. And they were a couple plays away from being in the AFC Championship game and being on that Super Bowl run. So a disappointing end, but overall not a truly disappointing season, except in the context that the team did have a MVP candidate player, multiple MVP candidate players actually, between Lamar and Derrick Henry, and they still could not get there at the end of the day, and they still beat themselves. But let's get into it with the postseason awards. MVP, I mean, he might be the MVP of the league still, so, it's hard to argue with Lamar Jackson. And it's funny because Derrick Henry would with the season he had, would have been an MVP on probably 29, I would say, out of 32 teams. I think the only 3 teams that I think he would not have been the MVP on for the way he performed would be the Bills, the Bengals, and the Ravens. And that's because Jackson, Allen, and Burrow all had incredibly good seasons. And even then, you could argue Burrow. But I think Derrick Henry would have definitively been the MVP on 29 teams and arguably one more. He would not have been in Buffalo with the performance he had because of the season Josh Allen had, and not in Baltimore. But Lamar, phenomenal season. And that playoff loss, yes, he threw the really bad pick, which was actually a route miscommunication. And upon further review, both players admitted to it. It was Rashad Bateman was the target there. And then the fumble, which he admitted he should have just eaten it. He was trying to recover and make something happen, and he really should not have. He admits that. But then his play down the stretch would have gotten the team back in it if not for the fumble and the drop. So, it is what it is. Biggest surprise has to be safety Ardarius Washington. Now, people forget, this defense was one of the worst, if not the worst, in the league through 10 games. The 11th game was when, right around 10 and 11, they benched safety Marcus Williams and stopped going to Eddie Jackson. They moved Kyle Hamilton back to a true safety position, and they put Ardarius Washington next to him, and the team turned around and the defense was stellar the rest of the way. And Washington had a lot to do with that, and he actually made big plays on multiple occasions that helped lead them to victory. So Ardarius Washington, big surprise. Guy who Ravens fans have known about for some time, but just now getting his opportunity due to injuries. Injuries to him is why he hasn't gotten more playing time up to this point. and he showed out in his time. Biggest disappointment, there are lots of guys who you could have put here. Roquan Smith did not have his greatest season. Defensive tackle Justin Madubuike did not have his greatest season. Yeah, and a couple other pieces on defense you could argue, but I am going to go with outside linebacker David Ojabo. This was the year of his breakout opportunity. No Jadeveon Clowney in front of him, no other pass rushers in front of him. He had to beat out he had to beat out a third-round rookie, which he kind of did, a former fourth-round pick who's a run-stopping specialist on the edge, Tavius Robinson, a 32-year-old journeyman in Kyle Van Noy, decent pass rusher, but, a guy who has a second-round pick and could have been a first-round pick you beat out. And then Odafe Owe, who had kind of underachieved to this point in career. Owe did have a good season, by the way. Shout out to him. You just had to beat out two of those guys, which you beat out the third-round rookie. Good for you. He was the developmental pick anyways. You just had to beat out one of those guys to get consistent playing time, and you couldn't do it. You showed up in like 5 or 6 games where you made like 1 or 2 plays, and that was it. This was the guy that people were lauding, like, oh my God, I can't believe the Ravens got this guy in a second round. It was because of his injury. This guy would have been a top 10 pick as a pass rusher. It's okay that they passed on George Pickens, and by the way, it is okay that we passed on George Pickens. Great talent, great talented player, but my God, keep that attitude away from me. Thank you. But he has not been able to do it despite getting opportunities to prove it. And next year, and this is assuming they don't address the position, whether it be by another veteran journeyman free agency, which, by the way, both Owe, Robinson, Adisa Isaac, everybody's back next year. So he has to compete with the same guys. And Isaac will have another year with the playbook. So who knows? Isaac might pass him. And this is assuming they don't address the position in the draft and basically boot him. But this is the make or break year for him, probably as an NFL player coming up next year. Unsung hero, Rashad Bateman. I think most Ravens fans had kind of counted this guy down and out. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option for next year, but what I did find out is they signed him to a 2-year extension instead, which gave him some guaranteed money, which was a brilliant move on their part because he came out and showed himself as the number 2 receiver. Zay Flowers, very good season. Pro Bowl player, probably won't go to the Pro Bowl because he was dealing with an injury that kept him out of the playoffs. Bateman showed up big as that number 2 receiver, that number 2 weapon. At times outplayed Andrews and Isaiah Likely to be the second target on offense, and in the playoffs showed very well. So very good season for Rashad Bateman, and shout out to him. I feel very confident next year with Flowers and Bateman as receiver 1 and receiver 2. Now, what they do with Andrews at tight end, we're going to talk about that one in a second. Player to watch next year, cornerback TJ Tampa. 4th-round pick this past year, was injured on and off. I think ultimately ended up on injured reserve for the season. Wouldn't have had much playing time anyways, as the team had Marlon Humphrey, 1st-round pick Nate Wiggins, Brandon Stevens, and Tre'Davious White ahead of him. Now, White and Stevens are both free agents. I do not expect the team to bring Stevens back. I expect Stevens to possibly be overpaid as a cornerback 2 in the free agent market, so I don't expect to see him back. Even if they bring back Tre'Davious White, there will be a spot open for a boundary corner, and that's the profile that Tampa fits. Now, I do expect them, like I said, to sign a veteran. I also expect them to address the position in the draft, depending on how they address it. Now, he is not on the chopping block if they do both of those things. That would be either 4th-year player Jalen Armour-Davis or veteran nickel corner who was hurt most of the year, Arthur Mollett. Those would be the guys on the chopping block, not Tampa. But I think next year he could be a guy where, let's say, a couple injuries happen, which this team is known to have. If you need a guy to step up and be that 3rd boundary corner, I think Tampa will have the opportunity to take that, and I'd like to think that he will show that he is worthy of being basically the 4th corner on the team, and it would be behind Marlon Humphrey, and it would be behind Nate Wiggins, and it might be behind a veteran or a rookie. But if Tampa can prove that, then moving forward, the team will have a very good cornerbacking core. Taking a look at the offseason preview, they have some salary cap space right now, and I think it's going to be really easy for them to get more. I think the two easy targets are Marlon Humphrey, who they can do a pretty reasonable restructure on and get a good chunk of money back, and Mark Andrews, who they'll have to make a decision. He's got a big cap hit. They can save a lot of money by trading him or releasing him, and that would get them to a position where they can address several needs in free agency. And then in the draft, they have all of their usual picks going up through round 4. They do not have their typical 5th round pick. That was traded away at the trade deadline, but they are projected to have an additional 4 draft picks, a 4th, a 5th, and 2 6th rounders via compensatory pick. Plus, they have an extra 6th rounder from Carolina in that trade where they sent that 5th round pick out. So they are projected to have 4 6th round picks, 2 4th rounders, a 5th, and a 7th. And I think depending on some of the trades they could make involving guys like Mark Andrews, that draft capital could be even more. So that'll give them a great opportunity to build up the depth and the bottom part of the roster. So what is on their to-do list? They need to manage the salary cap without doing too much restructuring. That's an opinion. In my opinion, I don't love it when teams do the restructuring with the void years because it just makes their future salary cap situation much more complicated. Now, the Ravens are one of the teams where I think it could be justified because they would be doing so in order to make a run at the Super Bowl during their Lamar Jackson window. But if they could, get the Humphrey restructure done and handle the Mark Andrews situation, do that and not have to touch some of the big contracts through restructures, which would really mess up their 2026 and 2027 seasons, the contracts of guys like Justin Madubuike, like Roquan Smith, like Lamar Jackson. If we can leave those alone, Justin Tucker, if we can leave those alone, and get the money we need out of a few guys. They already did it with Marcus Williams. They agreed to a deal with a reduced salary with a promise of a post-June 1st cut designation. So they got the salary cap back from him that they needed to get the ball rolling. And I think if they restructure Humphrey, which I think is a logical move, but you look at his contract, it works out. And then move off of Andrews, or agree to a restructured future deal where his cap hit comes down significantly. That opens up the door for them to make 4 or 5 signings of significant value. They'll have to give a tender restricted free agent contract to Ardarius Washington, or just go ahead and sign him to a contract now and, leave the wonder out of it. And then they'll have the Ronnie Stanley situation to address. That's going to be a big free agent. Really, and that's much because, like I said, I don't see the team bringing back Brandon Stevens, other free agents, take it or leave it, Nelson Aguilar, who are some other ones? Patrick McCarry, the veteran backup. Offensive line will need some loving, but getting good value. This team, they did it last year with Derrick Henry, and also got some good value out of a couple other signings. Kyle Van Noy, I think, was a very good value. So continuing that trend, that will help the team manage their salary cap situation, and it will help them continue to keep the roster strong as they continue to work their way through their Super Bowl window with Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying that it's closing soon, but you never can be too careful. You got to strike while the iron's hot. I think he's playing the best football of his career. I don't think it's physically possible for him to have a better season than he did last year. And same with Derrick Henry. I think at this stage of his career, I think we're at the peaks of both of these players, and I think now is the time for Baltimore to strike. And if that means, trying to get a good value with a severely backloaded contract that the team will have to deal with in 2026 and 2027, that makes sense. And then even in that same vein, if they do feel the need to restructure a few more guys to get maximum value out of next year, I think this is the time to go get it. That will do it for tonight's show. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky that's on a whole nother planet. Do check them out at planetjerky.net. Also, Seal the Deal Wax Seals, custom wax stamps, perfect for your special occasion. Check them out on Instagram at sealthedeal_wax seals. Vital Apparel, shout out to them and their ongoing commitment to mental health research. Use code IESR to get 15% off of their gym wear today and continue to help them support that cause. And then newest sponsor, Raw Nutrition Supplements. Get rawnutrition.com, use promo code IESR to get 10% off today. Also, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms, X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, which is not banned, and YouTube at IE Sports Radio. Visit the website, iesportsradio.com, where you can check out the blog, the sports pages, whole bunch of the merchandise, whole bunch of different stuff there. Listen to us on IE, Apple Podcast, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, and so much more. And do be sure to follow yours truly at letswine_ISR. You can find me on X and Instagram. Yes, even after the incredibly depressing ends to the Commanders and Ravens seasons, I will still be on there repping it hard. And of course, the show's main message, please drink responsibly. Do not drink and drive. One of my favorite social media topics regarding this topic is that you can afford an Uber or a taxi before you can afford a DUI. So please drink responsibly. Do not drink and drive. It is simply not worth it. We will be back next week starting a brand new theme for the month of February and leaving football behind us for a few weeks to talk hockey, basketball, and college sports. We got a lot of catching up to do in the college basketball ranks, and we intend to do it next week. Maybe the Lizards will win a game before we get to do that. I know, I end on a joke. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. This has been Mike Patt for Let's Whine About DMV Sports on the IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Have a great week. See you next time.